Have you seen Star Wars?
In a recent interview with Empire magazine, Kathleen Kennedy teased about the return of characters from the Star Wars sequel trilogy, these characters being Rey, Finn, Poe, and maybe even Ben Solo as well. But before we get into all that and what she said, please leave a like on today's video to help me defeat the evil YouTube algorithm, and subscribe if you're one with the Force. So what exactly did Kathleen Kennedy, the current Lucasfilm President, have to say about the sequel trilogy characters? So here's the full quote of what Kathleen Kennedy said and what the paragraph says about this in Empire magazine. They say, "It sounds like there may be more stories to come involving the crew introduced in the most recent sequel trilogy, which wrapped up on the big screen with Rise of Skywalker in 2019. Certainly those are not characters we're going to forget," teased Kennedy of that third generation of Star Wars heroes. "They will live on, and those are conversations that are going on with the creative team as well." So that's the end of the quote, and just side note, I do wonder if the conversations that they're having with the creative team would involve something like Rogue Squadron, because we've been talking about how that's going to be possibly post-Rise of Skywalker. So I wonder if that's something that they've been dealing with and why there may have been creative differences on that movie specifically. But just last month we talked about the breakfast that Kathy had with Daisy Ridley, who played Rey in the sequels, and there have been rumors going around for a while that Finn is going to get his own spin-off series on Disney+, even rumors that J.D. Dillard, who's supposed to be directing a Star Wars movie, would be the one to helm that series instead of his movie. So it does feel like there are more stories to be told with these characters, and I think that's pretty much to avoid what happened with the original cast from the original films. And what I mean by that is that a lot of us, looking back, would kill to see Luke, Leia, and Han go on more adventures after Return of the Jedi, when they're in their prime, and before The Force Awakens when they get a little older. But now that the actors are older, and some have sadly passed away like Carrie Fisher, it's kind of impossible to have these characters actually return for more stories that are actually only focused on them. And since all the sequel trilogy cast are still young and they're in their primes, it would make a lot of sense for Lucasfilm to want to use this time and use these characters as much as they can going forward to really establish a legacy for them that could be more impactful than someone like Anakin, Padme, and Obi-Wan, or Luke, Han, and Leia, and that's a really tall order to do. But I'm just saying that now that they have these characters and these actors, and they have a lot of time going forward, they can really do that right now. And truth be told, I'm a little torn on this idea of getting more stories about all three of these characters. For me, Finn seems like his story was not finished at all, and the sequels really wasted his character and gave him no arc that, other than him shouting Rey for like 3 movies. So we would all love to see Finn come back and make a real difference in the Star Wars universe, and I think exploring that aspect is unique. I think exploring his character is the right move. But if Finn is Force sensitive, if that's really true, and he learns to become a Jedi from Rey, then we're going to have to see them on screen together, those two characters, Rey and Finn, and that's all fine and dandy, but it honestly just makes me regret that the sequels didn't do these characters more justice, because if I have to get a series based on them, it feels like, well, why didn't we have that conclusion in that story of these characters in their movies? That was the time to make them impactful, don't do this later on. And that's kind of the difference between the original trilogy characters and the sequel trilogy characters. And what I mean is that when you look at the original trilogy, and when it comes to an end, you don't feel like you need to see more from Luke, Han, and Leia. Now, that doesn't line up with what I just said earlier. I want to see more from Luke, Han, and Leia, but the difference is I don't need to see more from these characters, because their stories were over, and at the ending of the original trilogy, at the ending of Return of the Jedi, it felt satisfying to get a conclusive end to their story, and you felt like you really didn't need more. Wanting and needing more from their stories are completely different. I don't feel that way for Finn, Rey, Poe. I feel like we actually need to see more of these characters so we can actually get to a point where it feels like their story is truly over. I didn't feel that way at the end of Rise of Skywalker. I didn't feel like I wanted to see more of their characters and wanted to see more stories from them, but I do feel like I need to, because I felt like what we got wasn't satisfactory. So these sequels never really gave us a satisfying conclusion to their character arcs or lack thereof. So yes, let's do a Finn series and let's see him come back, but I say this almost with disapproval over the sequels and their story that didn't utilize the characters the way that they should have. But I will say that this is the right move by Lucasfilm to bring these characters back, and I always say we gotta give credit where credit is due, we gotta call a spade a spade. This is a good move by Lucasfilm, because even if you're like me and you don't really like the sequels, or maybe you're just not that into the characters that are in these movies, this is giving fans an opportunity to connect with these characters once more, and if you're a sequel fan, that's something that can bring you a lot of joy. I point to something like the Clone Wars, who really did a good job on making Anakin as a character not only more relatable, but more enjoyable. He's almost insufferable in the actual prequel movies, but when you watch the Clone Wars, it adds a lot of depth to his character. It would be a lot better if we could have had Hayden Christensen do that in like a live-action Clone Wars series, but that just couldn't have happened at the time. So now that we have an opportunity to do that with these live-action characters like Rey, Finn, and Poe, and possibly have them in a series to give them more fleshed-out characters, I don't see why you don't do that. I feel like this is a really smart move. The biggest thing that excites me about seeing something like Rey or Finn return and seeing them on the screen again would mainly be seeing what happens after the Rise of Skywalker. What are the challenges that these characters face now that they defeated Palpatine yet again? Clearly the Final Order is destroyed, but what about the First Order? God, why the fuck did they pick these awful names for the villains? Now, I'm very indifferent on if Rey or Poe returns, because to me, I think you're going to need millions and millions of dollars to get Oscar Isaac to return, and he would need an amazing story just to even bring him back to play Poe again. And with Rey, I don't feel a connection to her. I'm sorry, Palpamemes, if you're watching this. I just have not even the slightest interest in her story anymore, and I don't really think there's anything else to do with her character at this point. But Finn has so much potential for story going forward. He could liberate the stormtroopers stuck in the First Order. He can honestly just travel the galaxy as like a nomad, freeing people from crime lords or evil governments, just working with former escaped stormtroopers. I mean, it feels like Finn is the character out of the sequel trilogy that we can all relate to the most, because like us, he's just kind of brand new to this idea of an open galaxy and free exploration. He came from being a stormtrooper, and that's the only life he knew. So now that he's like us as an audience member, just new to the galaxy and sees all these possibilities and opportunities, I don't think there's anything holding him back anymore. So I would love to see what they can actually do with him and give him more character, because that's the character out of the three that I like the most. But tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. Which of these three sequel trilogy characters do you want to see return the most? Rey, Finn, or do you even want to see Poe come back in something like Rogue Squadron? Please leave a like and comment on this video before you go, and subscribe to stay up to date on the latest news in Star Wars. I'm Star Wars Only. I will see you all next time, and may the Force be with you, always.